My name is Albia Miller, and today I'm honored to speak with Daryl Farnbach, and he's in several historic societies here in Temecula, California, and we will be discussing the ambience of his society building and meeting place here out here on Temecula Parkway, and we will be discussing the future of Butterfield Square, downtown Old Town Temecula. Mr. Fernbach, what are our plans to keep the Butterfield Square where it is?
Well, of course, would like to have plans to keep the Butterfield Square, but others have other ideas, and we have done some protesting, and we've gone to all the organizations that the city has, the City Council and the Planning Commission and the Old Town Review Board, and they were sort of had deaf ears on any of our concerns. And of course it's passed that will be a 6-story hotel and a 5-story parking structure. However, we're working to try to see what we can do to salvage what's left of the Butterfield Square.
So as we speak, the Butterfield Square is behind a fence. Has certain infrastructure been removed, or could it be brought back to what it was, housing for offices, attorney offices, and artists? Can it be restored?
Well, actually, it's owned by Mr. Truax, and it's really his decision on what to do with it. We would love for him to keep it as it is, or to restore it, or to incorporate it into a project that he would have. That would kind of be our preference. We have requested some of the artifacts. Some are very historical, and of course it is a piece of art that was built and designed by artist Bob Morris. Bob Morris has had his fingerprints, handprints, footprints all over Temecula, and really most of us that have lived in the valley since the 1970s and 80s really recognize Temecula and the Temecula that Bob Morris sort of created. There are original buildings that came before Bob Morris, but he added to the wonderful ambiance that we know of Old Town. 6-story structures that go from block to block, from curb to curb, just don't really seem to work in my mind.
So I think the Butterfield Square needs to stay as it is, where it is, and not piece by piece removed. So what's the alternative for Mr. Truax? Could he place his hotel in another area and still be a part of Temecula?
Well, he could. I've worked with developers before, and I think that there's always a plan that can benefit the developer and the historian or the preservationist if they work together. And it's happened over and over again. Perfect example is the Vail Headquarters, the 4.5 acres that's between Kolh's department store and Famous Footwear. That was something that a developer wanted to put a grocery store on, and we sued and came up with a very good plan that worked out well for the developer and for the historians.
So Daryl, I'd like to talk about some of the organizations that you're with. There seem to be several that have a strong force here in Temecula for preservation and their projects. I'd like to hear about those.
Well, the first thing that we formed here was the Vail Ranch Restoration Association. When we got together in 1999 to save the historic property here, there was no historical society. There had been one, but it had been disbanded. So we formed the Vail Ranch Restoration Association, which is a nonprofit organization. And then a few years later, the Temecula Valley Historical Society was formed. And we felt that the VARA, we call it the Vail Ranch Restoration Association, had enough to do to preserve the historic ranch property and didn't need to be confused with other preservation projects that we needed to do. For example, when the Historical Society was formed, the first project that they took on was the restoration of the Wolf Tomb, which was in very much disrepair, setting in a vacant lot, being vandalized by children and, well, adults and whoever wanted to vandalize it because it was behind a fence that nobody could see. And we actually spent about $25,000, raised that money to restore it. So we've had some worthwhile projects that we've had to work with. And we've also spoken up for buildings in Old Town that were slated for demolition or some other form, correct. And we've gone to city council, and we've had some success with that. The 1909 building is an example of that. That restaurant is an original building that was built in 1909. It was the Machado store, and it was the third store that had been built in that spot. The other two had burned, and we explained to the city council the importance of keeping that building, and they did keep it. And then the owner of the property also did a very good job of keeping the ambience of that building and then adding new features to it so he could make a living out of his property. And that's important. You invest in property either to live there or you invest in it to support your family or families. And I think that that is an aspect that we as preservationists have to remember, that it is private property and we cannot just go in and take it over. We have to work with the developer, and we are willing to work with the developers, and we have in the past and could in the future if the developer would be willing to work with us.
Rebecca Farnbach.
Yes.
We're welcomed and honored to be here in front of the Temecula Restoration Association of Vail Ranch. Could you tell us a little about the history of the buildings?
Yes. Some of these buildings date back as long ago as 1866. And many of the other buildings then were built by the Vail family, who had a huge cattle ranch here and dominated the whole Temecula Valley from 1904 until 1964. So they had 87,500 acres. And we felt like it was an important heritage site to save for the benefit of the community of Temecula. And we feel that that encourages really a good community spirit. It unifies us all and helps us to appreciate where we've come from and hopefully gives us vision for where we're going.
Yes, and what are the benefits for the children?
You know, we engage them in their imaginations because we show them the old Butterfield stagecoach trail, and we have a replica of a stagecoach, and they can climb into it. We have a little train, like trains once ran through the Temecula Valley here. And we have a lot of toys out in the yard that are non-electronic, so they can throw bean bags and do other things like that, play on the grass, interact with other children instead of just being tied into electronics all the time. We also have a little library, a little free